Hi everyone. I would like to thank again Shirin and Anaïs, who apparently is not here, and Finastra for inviting me. So I don't bring a presentation because the aim here is not to talk just about Verifeasy, but it's also to talk about how I ended up here, even if the story is just starting now. So we could think that the area we're working in, which is international trade, benefits a lot from innovation and new technologies. But one of the most used means of payment, which is called documentary credits, actually didn't really evolve in probably the past century. So a documentary credit, which is mostly used for large and risky transactions, works like a normal credit that an importer will ask its bank to buy something from a seller, and the bank will assure the exporter that it will get paid if he sends like 10 documents on average, which can be bill of exchange, insurance document, transport document, certificate of origin. There is no limit in the documents they can send. The exporter will prepare all the documents and will send all the documents to the bank, which will manually check all the documents against the credit terms and international rules. If documents are compliant, then the money will be released. Last year, there were on average 4.2 million documentary credits issued, and almost 70% of documents were rejected at first presentation because they had human mistakes in the documents. After an examination that took an average of more than an hour by the bank, costing straight fees for exporter, or operative costs for the banks, and delays for all the people involved in the transaction. So my name is Arnaud Doly. I'm dropped out of school when I was 15, so I don't have any diplomas. I was just selling websites in Strasbourg, which is a city in east of France. And I ended up at 18 leaving to Manchester just for fun, and I just wanted to leave Strasbourg, which is not a really big city. And there, after reading the biography of Mark Rich, I don't know if any of you know who Mark Rich is. It's the founder of Glencore. I ended up being really interested in commodities trading. So I bought all the books I could find on Amazon about commodities trading. And I spent like 4 months just trying to read them all and understand how commodities trading works. So I've seen that every transaction in commodities trading is paid with documentary credits, which is something that is complicated. I didn't understand how it was working, and no one really understood how it was working. So I found a kind of training in London where I could learn how this mean of payment was used. And I ended up thinking like, okay, this is too complicated. I cannot do that. And I left back to Strasbourg, ended up working in real estate. And then it was in 2017, I thought, when I was in Manchester, my flatmate, who was a student at Manchester University, when he was giving back assessments, the university were scanning all the assessments and were uploading them on a software that was checking for plagiarism on Google and Wikipedia. So if you had more than 10% of plagiarism, then the assessment was not received. And I thought, okay, here in a documentary credit, you take the credit where you have all the information, who asked for the credit, who is the beneficiary of the credit, which one is the port of loading, the port of discharge, what is the description of the goods. So if we take the credits as Google or Wikipedia, and we take all the other documents like certificate of origin or insurance certificate as the assessment of the student, then we can say that plagiarism is great, because every information that is present on the credit has to be the same on the documents. The applicant, the person who asked for the credit, of course, have to be written in the same way on every document, same as the amount of the credit, same as the volume of the transaction, the description of the goods. And I basically quit my job on September 2017 to start to try to take these university softwares and try to invert them into understanding credit documents and actually make the conformity checkings. So now, after more than 2 years of development, we aim to release a public version of our platform, which basically automates all this verification. So we aim to release that in January. So what we found out is that we can actually, by using optical character recognition, plugged in with rule engine where you put all the international law and basically some business rules for examination of documents, you can actually extract all the information from the credit documents and try to compare them, and doing cross-document verification, doing credit term verification and international law verification, meaning that a task that is today really complex and takes a bit more than an hour can take less than 3 minutes today with the platform. So today we're working with 4 banks, the 2 leaders, and we are starting a 5th bank for a POC that you were talking about before, the proof of concept with a last bank by the end of the month. So I think what is really interesting now is that apart from the fact that now it's just the technology that has to prove that it's working well against how it's done manually now, I think on the past 2 years there have been, of course, many mistakes that have been made. I think this is what we can talk about now as a hackathon. You can have some really interesting projects going out of it, and probably some companies that can be started after it. I think probably the first mistake that was made is that I tried to look too quickly for a CTO, but didn't find it, so I moved out straight away for informatic engineering company, as I thought that if I spend 6 months trying to find a CTO, probably someone is going to have the same idea, and I won't be able to start the company after that. So first thing I did was like, okay, I don't find a CTO after 3 months, let's try to raise money, and then we're going to pay someone to actually do the job. The good thing with a hackathon is that when you have a project, you can actually build your team. So every thing and every skill is actually already inside the team. If after the hackathon you want to start a company out of the product you made, out of the project you had, you already have a team that is inside. I think this was probably one of the biggest mistakes I did at the beginning, because the transition to actually bring the technology in the company was something that was quite painful, and it still is right now. So I think it takes quite a lot of months to do, and no one is really happy when you enter a company and you know that you didn't do the code and you didn't do the technology. It's someone else, like outside of the company, that actually did it. I think also one of the mistake was, and I think you said it right before, was to under-evaluate how long it can take to work with banks. I thought that like a normal customer or a B2B customer, when you come to a bank and you have something that might interest them, they will actually be quick because everyone talks about open innovation and stuff like that. But the processes are actually very, very long. So it can be something that sometimes can be surprising. Good thing that we had a long time to actually, we needed some time to develop the technology, because I think if you just end up with a product and you start looking for a customer when the product is ready, then you're gonna have a bad time, because you're going to spend weeks, maybe months with a product that is finished, but you don't have any customer to buy it, because the acquisition process is very long. So I think banks is notably long for these kind of processes. I think some banks we have in pilot right now that we started in September. The first time I spoke with them was in December 2017. So it shows a bit how long the process can be. What else can I say about all the mistakes? Because there are so many. I think the list is very hard to find the best ones. I think you can never overthink. We've been really slow sometimes. I think we took months on some problematics that could have been made in probably a matter of days, if just we said, you know what, let's just do it and we'll see how it goes. Overthinking can be something really bad, because as you can see, when I had the idea of trying to turn a university software into something for trade finance, it took me almost 3 years to have the idea. I mean, I could think like, why didn't I have this idea before? Because I had the information. But if I tried just looking for extraction software and technology, I would have probably found it earlier. So I think sometimes you overthink. That's why we took 2 years to actually develop something that could probably have been done 6 months earlier. But at the end of the day, the time frame is still good, because we wouldn't have any banks if the product was ready 6 months earlier. So This is probably even more on a hackathon. I don't know what is the length of the Spark Day in terms of days, but when you have short period frame for decision making, it's really important, I think, to go quickly. When you see, for example, I don't know if any of you know Y Combinator, they have 3 months programs, and you can have some crazy companies going out of it, when sometimes on the same subjects you have people working for a year and that still don't have any technology that is ready. So quick decision making and hard working on some key decisions and key paths means that you can actually reach the objective much quicker. Even though you took more time, you can still be at the end much quicker. So right now, I think most of the mistakes, I mean, we will still do quite a lot of mistakes over the next weeks, months and years, but right now most of these mistakes have been forgotten. I mean, we try to surpass them right now. So now everything goes well. I think the POCs, that is something that is really important when you do like startup weekends or hackathon, trying to go first for your users as quickly as possible, because when you are really like just into your company, sometimes you do some mistakes, and just speaking with one user, that they will tell you like, no, this is not what we want. But when you are just focused and you don't speak with your users, sometimes you can do some mistakes. So I think that going as quickly as possible for POCs and pilots and alpha tests and beta tests straight with the end users, this is something that can save you quite a lot of time, because these people are going to be the people that use your software and they will pay for it. So if you do something for you and at the end they don't want it, or it's not working the way they want, or it doesn't look the way they want, they won't get it. So this is probably something that we're really happy with, because at the moment we had a prototype, we already had some banks we could work with and end users, so document examiners in banks that can actually check for documents, so they understand it's not trying to take their jobs, it's just digital advisory that we are doing, so they don't do the most complex and long and error subject tasks. So I think this is really important, as sometimes we were really sure that the software, how it looked and all the functionalities were actually really the answer to this problem. But at the end, it ended up that on the first test we did on the first day, which was 1st of July of this year, the first day, the first person said like, yeah, but what is that, and we're missing this. Like, I cannot even work with it if it doesn't have this functionality, which was just copying all the analysis report, because they were sending that always by email to their clients. So it's that kind of little stuff that actually can point you straight to all the evolutions or corrections you have to do to your software as quickly as possible. And this is just by talking straight away with end users, as it's also something important, because we can see quite a lot of startups raising a lot of money and that have really interesting technologies. And after 2-3 years, you see that the company just collapsed, because they know that the product can be sold to so many people. At the end, they don't know where to start with. They try to sell it to everyone, and they end up spending huge amounts of money in communication, and no one really gets what they want to sell, because they are not trying to focus on one particular segment of clients. So trying to reach as quickly as possible and as early as possible with to connect with your customers. This is really important as well, because at least you will know by the end you are developing, by the end of the product development, you will understand who is your customer, what do you want to solve for them, like what is the problem they have, what is the solution you bring to them, and actually who will pay, what do they want really, instead of just the idea that you have. So this is probably like the best advice we had at the beginning, as We know exactly who are our customer and not. A bank who is not doing documentary credits is not a customer. An exporting company who is not using documentary credit is not a customer as well. So this is probably the most important part that we had, as we knew straight away who we had to talk to. It's not just like we can speak with any bank and anyone in the bank. We know exactly that we want to speak with trade finance directors, because these are the people who are going to use the solution. And at least you have fair advices and also some reviews on your product that are from people who actually know what you want to do and have the problems that you want to solve. So this probably is the most interesting comments you can have on your technology. So right now we just continue our pilots and aiming to raise in January, and so I hope the hackathon goes great for everyone, and we're gonna find some nice projects inside as well. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask.
Just a teeny announcement for you, at least that we are trade innovation software in Finastra.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite a leading solution. And the plan is to have the APIs of those products for importer of credits. So mostly your domain import and export letter of credits being available for the end of the year. So it might be slightly for the hackathons.
In December.
Yeah.
But we already had some talks with Anaïs and Davide about I think Fusion Fabric and that kind of stuff. So we're already ready to make APIs for Finastra. we're already in talks. The name is Verifeasy. Yeah, that's why we didn't bring something, because it was more about all the journey more than a company. But it's Verifeasy, so verification made easy.
The business model?
The business model is by the document. So per transaction, you have an average of 10 document types. So let's say invoice, packing list, transport document, that kind of stuff. And we bill per document, because on one transaction you can have 5 document types, on another you can have 15. And sometimes you're going to have the exporter that scan the documents, so it can pre-check the documents before sending them to the banks. So it can go down on the 70% of rejection and try to remove all the fees and all the delays you have. And the bank on its side will also check the documents, because they have to see what mistakes, what discrepancies you have in the documents in order to take a decision about whether they release the credit or not, and if not, for what reason. So it's really like based on the use you do. The platform is free, everyone can use it, but to see results, you have to pay per document.
I suppose you use some sort of machine learning or deep learning algorithm. What type of algorithm do you use?
We use machine learning algorithm, but it's not deep learning, as for that kind of technology you need to have quite a huge quantity of data. Thing is, like, out of all the decennies that this type of payment has been used, it has never been digitized. So it's only manual. People check by hand and then they put it on a shelf and not use it again. So we don't have enough data, as even when you pay by card, you need to have some kind of security. This kind of means of payment, you have quite a lot of data on it. So even banks, when you're working with them, they are not like, you know what, take all our documents. They are really, really careful with what they give you. As we know, just on one transaction, we know which company buys what from who at what price, what was the immatriculation of the boat that went from one port to the other. Like, you know everything about one transaction. So the access to data is really limited. So we use machine learning just so we can always learn, but we also have some really strict modules on top of it. So at least it doesn't really go crazy, because machine learning, when you don't have a lot of data to train it, it can make some mistakes sometimes. If you have, for example, a company that has an invoice which has the face of the invoice, and you have a packing list from the same company that just looks the same, but it's just the title that changes. A machine learning algorithm that didn't have enough data to train can actually do a mistake and think one is the other and the other way around. So we use it, but it's half machine learning, because we don't have enough data yet just to be using that. And I think in an area that needs to be so precise and meticulous, we cannot use only algorithms that have a neural network and can actually make decisions on their own, because it's too strict to allow that.
So what exactly the algorithm is and what is the performance measure?
Oh, this is, you need to ask to the technical team, because these are the guys who are working on it. Honestly, I don't have the name exact, but it's a framework that has been used. It wasn't all developed inside, because that would actually, even if in 2 years, I guess we would have some time to do it, as we changed a bit some of the specs, even out of the summer after the first pilot we did. There have been so many changes since the 1st of July, so I wouldn't have an answer to that.
So your basic technical thing is OCR?
Yeah.
Scan
The first part of the process inside, when the users scan the documents and upload them on the platform, the first part is OCR to extract all the data. So basically it's going to identify all the documents, classify the documents, extract the data from the documents and classify this data. And then it's going through a rule engine, which is going to compare all the data to understand that is the credit term, are the credit term respected, and is the international law respected as well. So it will just on the front end just send back an analysis report, either for the bank to know what they do with the credit, or for the exporter to correct documents.
Does your solution work also with documentary collections, remise documentaire?
For now, it's just on MT700 for Swift, so it's really on documentary credits and basically letters of credits. But this is something we're thinking about, as the first version is really aimed at letters of credits, and we will add some other rules to the engine rule from the ICC later, so we can almost cover standby letters of credit and all the other means of payment. All right. Thank you very much, and good luck for the hackathon.
I
Oh.
have one more question for you. How do you see the future of Verifeasy?
It's quite a tricky question, as for now we started with documentary credits, as this is something I know well. So the first version is really going to be aimed at this type of payment. I think the good thing with this type of payment is that it's really, really complicated. All the documents are unstructured, so we had to work for quite a long time to understand how we can extract data from documents where we never know where the data is located on the document. So the good thing is, when you start with something that is as complicated as documentary credit, you can actually end up going on many more other parts, like, I don't know, insurance, wealth management, real estate. Like, you have many, many other industries where you have a lot of documents as well, physical documents, and you have little verifications that are made every day and all the time on them, and which is like taking quite a lot of time. So by starting with one of the most complex means of payment we can imagine, and one of the most unstructured base of documents, we can easily adapt Verifeasy after to other areas, other sectors, other industries. So the aim today is to have the most reliable platform we can have for documentary credit, and then we can start to adapt it to other industries. You're welcome. But yes, you.